Okay, we're live on Facebook, part 2. Shammai, welcome.
Eitan, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good.
Yeah,
I think that I think we should just start over.
yeah. Let's.
Okay, okay. So this is Eitan Ben Avram from Aleph Mail here with my life chavruta, unofficial rabbi. He's not officially a rabbi, but he's definitely a teacher of Torah, Reb Shammai Siskind of Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh. Shammai, Shavuot is tomorrow night, man, and the extent to which I'm not ready is very high, but I don't know if anybody can truly be ready to receive the echoes of divine revelation. So what do we do? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, I was reading some. I've been. I mean, it's it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to figure out where to start with these things, right? It's like it's like getting yourself prepared. Like, what's the point of getting yourself prepared to the point that where you feel comfortable, where you feel no anxiety, where you're not anxious at all? Like, is that the point of being prepared for something? I think that part of being prepared is actually being a little bit anxious, because if you aren't
Mm-hmm.
anxious, that means you're not ready for the significance of what's about to happen. No, is that a fair assessment?
I think so. There's definitely you definitely don't want to be in your comfort zone at divine revelation.
No, I don't think it's just with divine revelation. I think it's anything. It's any profound experience. There's no such thing as being prepared. Being prepared, I think people conflate with not being nervous. so,
Mm-hmm.
so it's so
Mm-hmm.
it's not. I don't think that's a goal. But yeah, I hear what you're
Mm-hmm.
saying. There's certainly some prep that should be undertaken so that we can get the most out of the experience. Do you have any
Yeah,
thoughts
I
that
look
you're
at this
trying to
as
go
like a
with?
mental warm up. I look at this as a mental warm up.
Okay, that's
You
fair.
know, the first thing actually is, as with all of the holidays, to not have to have a peak experience. I realized at a certain point that like there's this pressure, like, okay, it's Shavuot, so I'm gonna have to have a mind-blowing experience, or else like I suck. And so the first thing is to just let go of the pressure of having to have. It's a form of spiritual materialism, in the same way a person has to have a Mercedes, or a person has to have that, pesto mozzarella, you know tostada, or whatever it is, right? It's like we don't have to have things. And so the first is just sort of a letting go and a surrender of being like, okay, I'm going to do the best I can to have a meaningful experience, but I'm letting go of having to have certain results. I think that's actually the first piece that I put forward in terms of getting ready for Shavuot.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I like that. I was reading a section from Rabbi Nachman recently in his second section of L'Kutei Moharan, where he says that he says that people go into prayer with the expectation that they're going to have some type of epiphany and or like even some emotional release during a prayer experience. And he says going in with that expectation ruins the whole thing. You got to go in with a certain type of simplicity. The lack of expectations that actually, it's ironic that the lack of expectations opens you up for actually receiving something of actual substance. So it's that letting go that you're talking about that actually allows it
Yeah,
to
actually, on that note, I want to tell two stories that I think are very connected to that idea of lack of expectation, and it has to do with the concept of receiving the Torah, or in Hebrew we use the term Kabbalat Torah, right? That we
mm,
receive the Torah. So I heard this story from Rabbi David Aaron from the old city of Jerusalem, that he was learning. This is like when he first began to study Kabbalah. He went to a teacher of Kabbalah. I believe he was a teacher of Sephardi Kabbalah, and he was in this class, and it was his first day there. And there's a bunch of people sitting in the classroom, and he's at the back of the class, and the teacher invites him up to the front of the class, right? And it's his first day there, first time there, and it's just like he doesn't know what's going on. And the teacher holds out an apple to him. So Rabbi Aaron's not sure what to do, so he goes and he reaches and he goes to take the apple. and then the rabbi pulls it away. And so then Rabbi Aaron's not sure what to do, and the teacher holds out the apple again. And so then again, Rabbi Aaron reaches out to take the apple, and again, the rabbi pulls it away. And so, and everybody's kind of chuckling, and he's not sure what to do. And so again, the rabbi holds out the apple, and Rav Aaron knows by this time if he reaches out to take the apple, it's just going to get pulled away. And then he suddenly has this idea, and he opens his hand. And then the rabbi drops the apple into his hand. Right? And what is he there to study? He's there to study Kabbalah. And what does Kabbalah mean? It means to receive. Right? And what are we receiving on Shavuot? The Torah. And what does that mean? It means that it's not something that we grab. It's not something that we take. It's something that we receive. Right? So I'm just going to connect that to a second story, which is I was in Renana once, and I was supposed to meet my cousin at a concert. And he told me he was going to be to the right of the stage. Right, and he gave me very exact instructions, and so I was hungry. We were supposed to go to his house afterwards, and I was just like, whatever. So we get to the concert. I go to the spot where I'm supposed to meet him, and I can't find him. Right, and so then I start looking around. I can't find him, and I'm sort of like, and I see that there's people smiling, and I don't care about that. I just want to find my cousin. You get a concert. There's people on stage. But then as I'm like, okay, I'm going to break the crowd into the grid, and I'm going to start scanning sections of the grid, right, until I find my cousin. I'm like very serious. But then as I'm scanning the crowd, I'm like seeing there people are smiling, and there's this guy on stage singing. And finally, I'm like, dude, you're at a concert. Why don't you just enjoy it? Right? Like, you're so hung up on enjoying the experience. And then as soon as I looked to my right, and my cousin was standing a few feet away from me. Right? So I was so hung up on my trip that I wasn't even able to see. And so that goes back to that whole idea of receiving, right? That as soon as I opened myself to what was actually there, in the same way that, Rabbi Aaron opened his hand, as soon as I actually opened myself to what was occurring, all of a sudden I found what I was looking for.
Yeah, I hear. That's very, very interesting. That's quite profound. I'll tell you an idea that I've been thinking of recently. It kind of dovetails what we're talking about right now. In that we talk about the value of Torah study, right? Of learning Torah, of poring over the books of Torah, of analyzing teachings of Torah, etc. Is there a distinction between the study of Torah and the receiving of Torah? And we talk about on the day of Shavuot, we talk about. I mean, this is the language that we use. We use the language of receiving Torah, or matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. The language of teaching and studying is not there. What does that mean that the Torah was received on Shavuot? Like, what does that mean it was received? That it was taught, that we got information on Shavuot? Like, even according to the tradition, the Torah in its entirety was not given over. The information, the body of knowledge that we call the Torah, was not given over on one day, right? I mean, even on the simple level of the text, it says that Moses was on the mountain for 40 days. Ostensibly, he was, getting all the information up there, right? So it took a much longer period of time for him to get all the knowledge. And also, you could say that through the whole desert narrative in the Torah, there are constantly new mitzvot, new commandments, new teachings that are coming up. It's not like all the information was given on that day, for sure not. So what does that mean? That is the day that the Torah was received? Like, what does that mean?
It's a very good question.
Yeah. So I think it goes to what we're talking about now. It really goes to the heart of what we're talking about now, that it's not a knowledge, it's not inculcating knowledge, it's not receiving this fact or that fact. It's about being in the mode of receiving. It's that you have received something. Even though you might not have unpacked the whole thing yet, you might not understand consciously the whole thing, you might not have analyzed everything that you're to the extent that you're supposed to analyze it and understand it intellectually, but you've received it. right? It's almost like the power of receiving was activated on that day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really has something to do with that.
I think that's also just writing on that. That to me is one of the most profound experiences that I have when I'm learning Torah, is that I actually feel like it's tweaking my consciousness. Like about a week or so ago, I was learning the Parsha in Hebrew and just reading the Hebrew to myself, and somehow in reading the Hebrew, all of a sudden, by the time I was done, I was a Jew living in Eretz Yisrael, and I was here to align my will with God's will. And that's who I was. It was like I had an identity shift. And I wasn't reading like a book on Chizuk.
Right.
And I wasn't reading anything that the goal was to inspire me. I'm pretty sure I was reading Bamidbar. Right?
Yeah.
But somehow, in reading it, it's almost like drinking alcohol or in some way partaking of some sort of mind-altering substance. It's like Torah itself is also a mind-altering substance.
Yeah, I think the specific point that you said just now about having an awareness of identity, having an awareness of place, that's something also very, very unique. That is we were talking about before we came on screen about how what the thing that uniquely characterizes Torah study apart from other wisdoms is that the process of its pursuit, the actual process, not necessarily the information, but the process of the pursuit has a transformative effect on a person. Is there a way for me to share my screen with you over here, Eitan, or only the host can do that? Here. Screen share. Here, I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to show everyone now a section over here from Orot Torah. These are Rav Kook's essays. You can see, Eitan?
Yeah, let me bring it on. Okay, here we go.
It's up?
It's up.
Yeah, okay. So these are Rav Kook's essays on the ideas of Torah study, Orot Torah, the lights of Torah, talking about Torah study, the process of developing Torah knowledge, and its influence on the individual and on the nation. And over here in the very last section of chapter 12, he says the following: Kishem she'ein Knesset Yisrael motzia el hapoal et sgulotea ki'im be'eretz Yisrael. The congregation of Israel, meaning the collective of the Jewish people, does not come into actualization other than in the land of Israel. Cain ein Adam Yisrael, so too the individual Israelite, the individual Jew, motzi et sgulotav, finds his or her powers and talents, haruchaniot, his spiritual prowess, ki'im al yedei haTorah, only through Torah study. So you already see here the dimension of development, the space that the nation needs to be in order to actualize itself fully, is the land of Israel, and the space that the individual needs to be in order to develop themselves is Torah study. Torah study forms a place. Shihi haaretz haruchanit, that Torah study is the spiritual landscape, hamat'ima l'sgulot haneshama Yisraelit, which is appropriate for the soul, the soul of Israel, meaning the individual Jew.
There's a part of me that has a difficulty with this teaching, which is more the truth of the teaching, which is that as much as I don't like to admit it, because I have a very strong universal streak, I know that I'm not going to be fully able to realize myself without learning Torah. Yeah. That in terms of self-realization, like I will never be able to fully be all that I can be if I'm not learning Torah. That it has to be part of my self-realization process.
Yeah, I hear you. This is by the way, explains another important term. You can still see my screen over here. I'm bringing up.
Wait, 1 second.
Source number 2.
Yeah.
This gives
All right,
insight, by the way, to
the source is now full screen, but it's not
another,
showing anything. Is it loading?
No, you don't see
Here we
anything?
go. Now I see it.
Yeah. Okay.
Talmud Bavli.
Yeah. So this is a section from the Babylonian Talmud in Tractate Brachot. Okay. So this is a pretty famous teaching. It quotes a verse from Psalms. Oev Hashem sha'arei Tzion mikol mishkanot Yaakov. That God loves the gates. He loves the gates of Zion within all the dwellings of Jacob. Okay. So the Talmud says, Miyom shecharav Beit Hamikdash, from the day that the temple was destroyed, Ein la kadosh baruch hu ba'olamo ela arba amot shel halacha bilvad. God only has the 4 cubits of Torah study, meaning before the temple was destroyed, there was the temple, and that was the dwelling space. That was like the geographical area. That was the space in which God could dwell. But once the temple was destroyed, that space was gone. So what space replaces that original space of the temple? It's the Arba Amot Shel Halacha, the 4 cubits of Torah study. Now, 4 cubits is a euphemism that's used in all rabbinic literature to describe the space of the individual. The individual
Arba
takes
Amot.
Right, the Arba Amot, right? It's even in Israeli idiom today. Arba Amot it means like the space of the individual.
Right, it's actually like a metaphor for personal space.
Correct, exactly. It's an idiom even in modern Hebrew to be used for like the personal boundaries, the personal area of the individual, right? So the 4 cubits of Torah study provides a space in which God can dwell. So that's exactly what it is. You know, we were talking about this in our last conversation about how growth requires a space in which it can occur, right? All growth requires a space, and whether that's a physical space, like you need, right? A tree needs to be in the correct environment that's appropriate for its growth in order to be able to thrive, right? Whether that's physical space or whether it's environmental space. I have to have the right vibes to use, right? You have to be in the right setting that allows the growth to occur, right? So Torah study is not just the content, it's not just the battery, so to speak, that allows the growth to happen. It's the space that allows the growth to occur, right? So this is one of the unique characteristics of Torah study, that the pursuit itself creates the space around the person, right? The person is, right? He's surrounded by this domain of spiritual energy that allows him or her to thrive, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Rabbi Baryah Schachter, who is the son of Rav Zalman Schachter Shalomi Zatzal, he called it the sanctuary. Right, that when you're learning Torah, you enter into a sanctuary, but it's a spiritual sanctuary. It's an invisible sanctuary.
Correct. So what we're saying is that if a person has communed strongly enough with this pursuit, he's made that pursuit something that defines him or her. He's made that pursuit part of him. So that means that this person is in that domain all the time. Doesn't matter where they happen to be geographically, they're in that domain. That's where they are, right? It's like one of the teachings of my namesake Shammai Azaken in Tractate Avot. He says, "Asay Toratcha keva umalachtecha arai." Make Torah study permanent and all of your mundane activities secondary. Now, he's not talking about how much time you allocate to one thing or another. It's not what he's talking about. What he's saying is that Torah study needs to be the dominant thing in a person's consciousness, right? A person might not spend as much time with his family as he does on, work and running errands and being at the gym and a whole other slew of mundane activities that we have to do. But no one's going to say that any of those activities have the same dominance in the person's consciousness as being with their family. It's not talking about how much time we allocate. It's talking about how central is that in the person's consciousness. So by making Torah Keva, the pursuit of Torah, permanent, it has a permanence to it. So in that way, the person is enveloped in this domain all the time. That's where he is. He's in this space of Torah, and just riding on this, because this is just coming to me as we're talking. Now, there's another section from the also from the Babylonian Talmud in Tractate Menachot, that it says something very interesting. It says on the verse it's from Moses' farewell speech at the end of Deuteronomy. Moses is giving a speech to the people about entering the land. Make sure that you're good. Make sure you don't mess up like you've been doing for the past 4 decades in the desert, because you're on your own now. I'm not coming with you. Right? That's essentially the flavor of the speech. And he and there's a long section in Parshat Akeb. This is your parsha, Eitan, right? This is your
my bar mitzvah parsha.
So, exactly. So there's a long section in there where he's urging the people to not forget the events of Sinai, right? He shomer lecha ushmor nafshecha me'od. Guard your souls. That's like, it's pretty intense language. Guard your souls. Pen tishkach et hadvarim, lest you forget this matter. Yom asher amadata lifnei Hashem Elokecha b'chorev, the day that you stood before God at Chorev, which is another name for Sinai. Okay. It's pretty intense language. Yeah. So
yeah, guard your souls.
Yes, guard your souls. Like, keep.
Like there will be consequences if you forget this.
Right. I mean, guard your souls is. The connotation of this, of guarding your souls, means that if you don't do this, then there's like a risk of, like, there's a danger. Right. There's a danger in not doing this. Yeah. So the Talmud in Menachot says that that if a person negligently forgets his Torah study, meaning talking about the importance of remembering things that a person learns, if a person receives a profound teaching, he should take efforts to remember it, right, to review and to make sure he doesn't forget things that he studies. If a person negligently forgets his Torah study, so he violates this imperative in the Torah, right? As it says, "En tishkach et hadvarim," lest you forget this matter, lest you forget these matters. Okay. Now the question on this section of Talmud, which someone pointed out to me a while ago, is that the verse isn't talking about Torah study. It's talking about remembering the events of Sinai. That's what it's talking about. That's the context of this verse. It's not talking about sitting in a class on some Torah topic, or learning some book, or learning the laws of this or the laws of that. It's talking about remembering the fact that the Sinai event took place. That's what it's talking about, right? But the idea is that that is the message. That is the very message, that a person's Torah study, that the mundane facts that a person engages with during the course of his Torah study, of these laws or those laws, the whole point of that pursuit is to constantly maintain a connection with that event, with the events of Sinai. That's the whole point. And if a person negligently discards his Torah teachings, so he's discarding his connection with Sinai. That's what he's doing, right? So the pursuit, constant, regular pursuit of pursuing Torah knowledge, is really, in essence, to constantly be tied, like, maintaining this umbilical cord with this event, right? This event that we're going to enter now. Yeah, it all goes back to this. It all goes back to the original receiving. Yeah.
But what about this concept that that what occurred was, there's what we read in the 5 books of Moses, that Moses climbed to the top of Mount Sinai, he communed with God, he was given 2 stone tablets with the 10 commandments, he came back down, and then the story continues, right? But there's also a very, very important parallel idea, which is often not discussed, except I think within Torah circles, that the oral Torah was given as well at Mount Sinai. That what we say when we say that God gave the Torah to Moses at Mount Sinai is not like the passing of a thing. It wasn't like he went and picked up some groceries.
Right. I mean, even from a purely logical perspective, it can't be that the written text of the Torah was given over at Sinai just because there are many more years of narrative that are post Sinai that are written in the Bible. Right. So it couldn't have been that the document that we refer to as the Torah was given at that time. If there was any one thing that was given, those are the tablets, as you pointed out, right? But the tablets are, a fraction of the actual information.
But so what are we doing
about the oral Torah versus the written Torah?
Yeah, I just think it's an incredibly important concept. I mean, when I first learned, I didn't learn this until I was 21. Quick background for me growing up Jewish was bagels and lox, the Holocaust on my bar mitzvah. I didn't identify as Jewish. I was in love with a shiksa. I was just like, and then I came to Israel. I ate bacon, egg, and cheese on a bagel growing up. Bacon, egg, and cheese on a bagel. That was like my breakfast throughout high school, right? So I was like deep into treifus. And all of a sudden, I discovered that Judaism was a spiritual path, and that what I thought Judaism was, which was the Old Testament, right? And even the term Judeo-Christian is just incredibly incorrect. Like that Judaism is so much more than the 5 books of Moses, so much more than the Tanakh, that Judaism is a world, that it's a spiritual path, that it's a consciousness, right? And that Torah itself is a consciousness. Like when we talk about the idea of Peshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod, there are stories of Hasidim learning about the secret of Techiyat HaMeitim from watching a Rebbe pull a potato out of water. Right? I heard this from Rabbi Yankel Shammai. I forget which Hasidic Rebbe it was, but basically there were these 2 Hasidim, and they wanted to know the teachings of Techiyat HaMeitim, and so this Rebbe came and he pulled a potato out of water. So what is Sod? Sod means secret, right? So somehow there was a transmission, right? In watching the rabbi pull the potato out of water, they received a transmission about Techiyat HaMeitim, right? So it's like this. I think the Sod level of Torah is not just Kabbalah, right? The Sod level, the secret level of Torah is like a transmission that occurs when you're living in the vehicle of Torah at all times. Like, it also adds a new depth to that story, like where, there's a chassid and he's on the road and someone asks him, where are you going? He says, I'm going to see my Rebbe. He says, oh, are you going to see the Rebbe because he performs miracles? And he's like, no. He's like, oh, are you going to see Rebbe because he has great Torah? And he's like, no. He's like, oh, well, so you must be going to see the Rebbe because he has amazing nigunim. And he's like, no. So he's like, well, then why are you going to see your Rebbe? He's like, well, to watch him tie his shoes. Right? That somehow there's a level of Torah that is not in the books and not even in the nigunim. It's like literally the field of consciousness itself, when you're interacting in a context of Torah, is a transmission.
Yeah, I think this goes to the idea of how the spiritual path of Torah, as you so nicely put it, emphasizes embodiment over just like meditative, intellectual level transformation. That there's a very big emphasis on acting it out, and only when things are being acted out and actualized on all the different strata of a person's being, then only then are the things really fully brought into only then it's fully brought into actualization.
Right, and I think that an example of embodiment is kashrus, right? Kashrus, tefillin, Shabbos. Like Judaism is a religion of hardware and action. It's an embodied religion. It's not just about meditation. It's not just about like focusing on the breath.
Yeah. Right. Here, I've just shared my screen again. Pull up the chat.
Hold on one second. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So
here we go.
This is the Talmud in Tractate Avodah Zarah. Okay, so they're talking about the very first chapter of Psalms. Okay, and the discussion goes like this: Amar of Hamnuna, Amar Rav. Afilu sichas chulin shel talmidei chachamim tzricha talmud. Even the mundane speech, the sichat chulin of the students of the wise, requires study. Even their mundane speech requires study. Shne'emar, as it says in the first in Psalms chapter 1, va'alehu lo yubol, describing, right, King David is giving this lengthy description of the qualities of this righteous person. And at the end he says that in the merit of his righteousness, he'll be, right, v'haya ke'etz shatula al palgei mayim, he will be as a tree that is planted on flowing streams of water, asher piryo yitain bi'ito, that his fruit he will give in his proper time, va'alehu lo yibol, and the leaves will not wither. So the Talmud is saying, what are the fruit and what are the leaves? Meaning the fruit is like, the profound content. It's like you were saying before, like, this chassid is traveling to go see his teacher, and the guy's saying, oh, well, you must be going to see your teacher because he has these profound insights and these amazing, epiphany triggering Torahs that he gives over to people. He says, no, I'm not going for the crazy mystical teaching. I'm not going for the fruit. Right? I'm going for the leaves. I'm going for the leaves. Even the mundane things that this person engages with, right? Those are packed with content. I want to see how the mundane can be permeated with this content. And that's what it's saying over here. Afilu sichas chulin, even the mundane speech, the mundane chatter, the chatter, that's really what it means. It's almost a derogatory term, by the way, in rabbinic literature. Sichas chulin, right? Even that requires study. A person should study it. Right? Why is that? Because as you were saying, someone who's achieved, right, growth in this path, the whole point of the path is to be able to imbue everything, imbue all the different strata with content, and then once a person's in that,
I think in terms of that concept of imbuing, one of the things that really changed my life is that originally I was taught to interpret the books of Torah through the lens of Pardes, that there's Pshat, Remez, Drash, and so that, there's the surface level meaning, the literal meaning, then there's Remez, there's like what this is hinting to, then there's Drash, which is like, sort of like what we can learn about life, or what is this a metaphor for, and then there's that Sod, which is that secret teaching. But the idea that there's multiple levels of meaning, when you live life in the context of Torah, when you live life, in a context in which everything is Torah, then Pardes doesn't just apply to whatever book of Torah you're learning, it applies to everything. Right? It applies to the conversation that you have with the guy at the Macolet when you're buying your milk.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
It applies,
the subtle layers.
Right, that it applies to everything, that every single interaction in life, and just as you are studying Torah in order to learn the mind of God, just as you are studying Torah in order to become closer to Hashem, every conversation having, every interaction that's occurring actually has a Peshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod, and that if you're living on that level, then it's also a vehicle for you to come close to Hashem. But that also means you have to have the right mindset, you have to have the right kavanah.
Yeah. And in light of what you're saying, there's also the Pardes, there's also the Pshat level, Drash, and Sod of understanding yourself. There's the surface layer of what's going on, then there's the illusion layer, there's the expounded layer, and then there's the the deep-rooted, right, and almost like mystical layer of what's going on, right?
Yeah,
whether you're looking at your own motivations or your own yearnings, right? You have aspirations, you have hopes and aspirations, like what's really going on. Like, you can point to this thing that I want, right? You say, like, I want that thing. So that thing that you're pointing to is just like the surface layer of what it really is that you want. There are so many layers of what that aspiration really contains. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's pretty. It's a very interesting idea that the Pardes is really just a lens by which you look at the. Right. It's like those guys, like professional photographers, that they come to an event, they come to like a wedding or some business conference they're supposed to do, and they come with this camera, and like on the camera is attached this long lens that they have to hook up to the camera, and this huge contraption, which is many times bigger than the camera itself, is, these multiple lenses that are kind of like put one onto the other in order to fix the image in a certain way to capture certain nuances that only these professional photographers can even appreciate, right? So it's like stacking all the lenses onto each other allows you to capture the full essence of the picture. Yeah. So like that's what Pardes is. It's not just an approach of analyzing a text, as you said. It's really the lens by which you engage with anything.
Correct. But at the same time, it's informed by Torah. Like you cannot enter. And at the same time, on the other side, we have to remember the warning, right? As in, you have to be very careful when you begin to look at life through this lens, right? Because, 4 entered Pardes, right? Like 4 entered into the Garden of Pardes and only 1 came out unscathed.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to be very careful. How much?
It's like enter at your own risk type of thing.
Right. So maybe it's just better to safer to just leave Pardes when you're studying the books, and besides that, don't think about it. But no, I think it's a vehicle for you have to take everything with a big grain of salt when you're interpreting things on that level. Right.
Yeah.
But I've had any number of experiences where it's like when you take that lens and you begin to live your life in the lens of Pardes, how you just see how Hashem is teaching you all the time. In fact, that's what I was going to say, is that, in terms of the Sod level of Pardes, there's any number of times where I'm davening the Shemona Esrei and I'm swaying and I'm chanting the words, and some part of me understands and knows, although I don't know why I know, that davening the Shemona Esrei is like a form of energy healing. Like, people go to like energy therapists, right? They like go and, like there's an idea that there's 3 levels of creation: thought, speech, and action. And that the words that we're saying are actually vehicles for energy. That like, with every single word we say, we're creating angels. Right. And if we're speaking words that are good, we're creating good angels. And if we're speaking words that are negative, we're creating negative angels. Right. So there's this idea that there's this connection between speech and energy and consequences in the world. And I've had experiences on any number of times where I'm davening the Shemona Esrei and I am feeling through the words my internal psyche being processed and shifted, that somehow there's work occurring inside me through saying the words of the Shemona Esrei. And I don't even understand what. It's like I'm feeling like these angelic hands inside me reprogramming me through davening the Shemona Esrei. And I don't even know what's going on, but I know that it's happening. And so that's like that Sod level. Right? I think actually you can also hear it too in music. Right, you can hear it in how different musicians play music.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a leap here and assume that when you have these experiences, and by the way, it's certainly something that I can resonate with. I'm not trying to imply that this is some subjective thing that goes on only in Eitan's world, but I'm gonna take a leap and assume that while you're doing this, the actual embodied practice that you're doing is just focusing on the words that you're saying, like just focusing on the words, focusing on the meaning. That's what you're doing. Like that's the action. That's the action.
Yeah, my goal is to pronounce the words correctly.
Yeah. It's not like you're reaching for some mystical experience. Like you're just going through the motions. You're doing the thing. You're focusing on the thing. You're in the moment. You're locked into the thing. Right, to the fundamentals level of the thing that you're doing, and then as you're into that, as you get locked in, as you build momentum with that, this kind of just happens. Right, the apple falls into the hand. Right, it's just the result of of being on the basics level. Right, I really think this is hooking around to what we were talking about before. That this is the secret of receiving. The secret of receiving is it's not a purely passive thing. I think the secret that it's honing in on is that jumping to the next level is a gift. It's something that's given by the humble commitment to the level before, right? Having these profound experiences in prayer, for instance, like you're saying now, they don't come as a result of trying to have a profound experience in prayer. They come from just humbly committing to saying the words kil chatan, right? Like how you're supposed to say the words, how you're supposed to enunciate them, the simple plain meaning of them, and then these other layers fall into place as a result of doing that. Like that's the process, right? It doesn't happen by forcing it. It happens by flowing with that, right? With that level.
Mm-hmm.
I think this goes back to what you just said about, trying to traverse the different rungs of the pardes can be a dangerous thing because, 4 went in, only 1 came out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a pro tip, so to speak, about how to be on that path in the safest, that when we start reaching and we overextend ourselves, so that's when the risk comes. But
I wonder
if we allow the trend. Yeah, go ahead.
I wonder if you finish.
Yeah, I was saying that if we allow the transcending to come, as opposed to trying to aggressively climb up to it or bring it down, however you want to look at it. If we take a more passive, letting go approach and just flow with the level that we're on now, then the next rung comes, right? It reveals itself. Right?
I think that also happens when you're davening with a minyan. In my experience, there's like a collective energetic experience of davening with a minyan, like starting out with Suke de Zimra and then going through into Shema, Shemona Esrei, Torah reading.
Just like you were talking about before when you were at that concert, right? You were at a concert, right? You were at a concert, but you weren't really at the concert until you allowed yourself to be there, right?
Correct.
Right? You were physically there, but you weren't really there until you realized that you were.
Yeah, until I realized I wasn't there and that I should just let myself be there.
Right. So so a person can be in a Beit Knesset, in a synagogue, with a quorum of people, and they're all praying, and you're there, and yes, you are geographically there, but you're not really there because you're not tuning in. It's just the tuning in.
And I think that's also, I think that's one of the difficulties that people have with Judaism, is that as much as there are explanations as to why we're doing what we're doing, there's a certain level that you just have to get it.
Yeah, and the getting it happens from the doing. You can't.
The getting happens from the doing. And just to bring that down, and that's one of the central themes of Matan Torah, of Shavuot, is obviously, Na'aseh v'nishma.
Yeah. The secret to that is that there is no way to hear without doing. That's the secret. That's what.
Right. We will do, and we will understand.
People interpret the messages behind the Na'aseh v'nishma as if the Jewish people are expressing this type of, over the top obedience. They're saying, we're going to do, even though we don't understand, we're going to do, and then we'll hear the explanation. That's totally missing the boat. Totally missing the boat. The secret of what that's saying is there is no way to understand until you do. There's no way to understand until you do. And, if a person gave themselves a chance to really consider this, I think that they'll understand that anything worth understanding, anything worth knowing, any profound maturing experience and knowledge realization worth having, anything, is only attained through this, right? Parents and teachers don't give over, things that can be, received by the students in the, I guess that makes sense. Now I'm gonna change my life now because I heard that explanation. It doesn't work that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing profound works that way. It only works by doing, experiencing, being there, and then it clicks because it's been, as we said before, it's been imbued. It's been imbued in the self, right? In the self by acting it out, and that's the secret of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's my take.
Yeah, and on that note, that's also, it's like what was revealed at Mount Sinai, Kashrus, what was revealed at Mount Sinai, Shabbos. It's like all of these embodied actions were part of the revelation at Mount Sinai.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. On that note, there was another piece that I wanted to hit. Besides Na'aseh v'nishma, all right. So then, what about this midrash of holding the mountain upside down, Shammai? What's going on with that? Can you give that over, and then can we talk about that a little bit?
Upside down? You mean like he suspended it over their heads and threatened them?
Correct.
That's like
Correct.
the midrash. Okay, so
Right.
so what you're referring to is a section of a teaching in the Talmud in Tractate Shabbat that says that God suspended the mountain over the heads of the Jewish people. He suspended the mountain above their heads and said, "In tikablu et Torah mutav." If you receive the Torah, then great. V'im lav kanti akvuratchem, and if not, here you will all be buried. Right? Basically saying that God, he held a gun to their head and forced them to receive the Torah. Right? So, what's trying to be communicated over here? So, like all midrashim, it's very, very unlikely that the things are meant to be understood literally. Rather, there's a message that's trying to be communicated. If we look at the narrative of the Mount Sinai experience, it was a very, very intimidating scene. Right? It says that there's fire everywhere and lightning and loud noises, and it says that the people were afraid, right? Like it says kol ha'am, right? They were a little freaked out because of this scene, right? Right. V'hahar bo'er ba'esh, the mountain was consumed in fire. Mipnei asher Hashem yarad alav, because God came down on it. Right? So this is a very intimidating scene. Okay, so one could say that if a person is confronted with such a scene in front of them, where they're at this mountain, they're experiencing this massive divine revelation, and there's fire and lightning and scary sounds all over the place, and they're said, "Will you accept the Torah? Do you accept this?" Right? So one could say it's not really like it's not like they're being politely offered to do this. They're kind of in a way being like coerced. Right? There was a bit of coercion involved in this experience. It's not like they could just say no. Yeah. So that was the idea, that the mountain was ki'ilu being held over their heads. The mountain, meaning the experience that was before them, was being metaphorically held over their heads and telling them, "Yeah, you gotta accept the Torah. Like, I'm making you an offer you can't refuse," type of thing. Yeah. And the Talmud goes on to say that like later experiences in Jewish history, right, brought about a shift in that, right? That the Jewish people, right, specifically during the time of Purim, people that are familiar with this teaching. So the Talmud continues and says, "Hadar v'kiblua b'yemei Achashverosh." The Jewish people collectively received the Torah. That there was a national revival during the miracle of Purim. That there was no revealed miracles that happened in the time of Purim. There was no supernatural events during that time of history. And despite that, the Jewish people all collectively recommitted themselves to their Jewish identity and receiving the Torah and being the chosen people, etc., etc. So that was in a way a correction for that missing element, that the Jewish people didn't have that in the original receiving of the Torah. But just putting that aside, the Maharal, Rabbi Yehuda Liwa of Prague, right? The famous Maharal of Prague. There's the legend of the Golem is associated with him, even though that's a bit fictitious, but he certainly made headlines. So his take on that teaching of the Kafalem Hargigigit, that the mountain was suspended over their heads. So he says the following. He says the Jewish people had already accepted the Torah. right? Before this divine revelation of the fire and the lightning and all that, right? It says explicitly in the text that God, they say to God, Kol asher diber Hashem na'aseh v'nishma. Everything that God says, we will willingly accept. And then after that, so it says that they witnessed this fire and they witnessed these loud noises and the sound of the shofar blast, etc., etc. So they had already willingly accepted it before this scary show began, right? So like the whole, it seems unnecessary. It would be as if you walk into an office and you work out the details of the business plan and you all sign the contract and you shake hands, great. And then right before you walk out of the room, the guy pulls a gun out of his pocket and says, "Are you willing to accept this business deal that you just accepted?" It's kind of redundant, right? Like everyone already accepted it.
We signed off on it.
Huh?
We signed off on it.
Right. They already accepted it willingly. So what was the point of being coerced? So says the Maharal, a very, very deep idea. It's a very deep idea. He's saying that the idea of the coercion, ki'ilu, as if there's an element of coercion in accepting the Torah, was to show the necessity element in receiving the Torah. That the Torah isn't this optional thing that you could say, well, I can kind of have it, or I cannot have it. It's like flipping a coin. Like, it sounds good. Okay, it might be an improvement, but like I could just as easily go without it. Like it could be right, could be either or, right? The idea of this element of coercion that accompanied the giving of the Torah was to communicate the necessity that Torah has to the individual and also to the nation as a whole. It's not just some extra thing. It's not just some, maybe yes, maybe no type of situation. No, it's absolutely essential. It's a vital thing. When you it's like when a person appreciates what would happen to them in the absence of something, so then they understand how vital that thing is to their own survival, right? If a person considers like happen if their heart, God forbid, wasn't functioning, or another one of their vital organs, didn't work or something, right? When a person appreciates what would happen in the absence of that thing, then they understand how essential that thing is to them, right? So that's what communicated. What's being communicated is that the Torah is essential. It's vital. Our being is inextricably bound with this thing. So that's my.
And what does that mean to you that your being is inextricably bound with the Torah?
For me personally,
Yeah.
It means that if I did not have this as the ultimate, that this is the ultimate context I mean, I try that this should be. This is certainly my aspiration. That this is the ultimate context for all the things that I do for my entire life. That if I didn't have this, then all of my endeavors and everything that I pursue in my life would be a hollow, empty shell. There would be no substance to anything. It would be,
that's my experience as well. That's my experience as well. That the Torah is the vehicle for my soul to experience life. That, I think it was really only when I was 21 years old that I actually woke up to my soul. That before that, I was living on the surface level of life, and it was actually learning Torah and the language of Torah and the concepts that all of a sudden my soul was like, oh wait, like my mind read these concepts and they reverberated like throwing a rock down a well. It like bounced off the sides until it hit like the waters of my soul. And then that water started flowing, and it was a completely different experience of life, and that's, I think, how I relate to that concept of that the Torah has to be, the ultimate context of your being, because I don't know. Again, it's one of those things that you just have to get. It's not something that you can teach.
In Hebrew, we say that to violate something, to violate a precept in Torah is lechalel, okay, which literally means to hollow out. That's what it means. violate Shabbat, they say they're mechalel Shabbat.
They're making it hollow.
Hollowed out. Shabbat has been made hollow. It means it's not like if a person, lights a match, strikes a match on Shabbat, then, we skip Shabbat, right? It just goes from Friday right into Sunday. That's not what it means. It means that Shabbat is there, but it's now hollow, right? You've hollowed it out, right? To violate a precept in Torah means to hollow out the thing. It's
and I think that's
the life has been sucked out of it, right? Just an interesting piece of trivia for whoever's listening. The longest chapter in the entire Bible, the longest chapter is Tehillim Kuf Yutes, Psalms 119. The longest chapter, 176 verses. And all 176 verses of this chapter is King David waxing poetic about his connection to Torah, specifically Torah study. That's the subject of the entire chapter. Okay? And the way that King David describes his relationship with Torah is always framed in this language of desperation. It's very, very deep and very intense. I would say it's certainly one of the top 10 in terms of intensity of Psalms, and Psalms can get pretty intense for whoever is familiar with the book, right? Lulei Toratcha Sha'shuai az avadati b'anyi. If it weren't for Torah, my source of joy, I would die from my grief. It's an incredible statement, right? And what David is looking, he's looking at what existence would be in that hollowed out state when all of life has been mechalel, it's been hollowed out, right? Life imbued with life and content, right? And this lofty, sublime spirit that all actions have this richness to them, all phenomenon have this richness to them, versus the hollowed out experience, right? Like those are the two poles in King David's mind. And for us, Torah, it provides that, right? It provides that ruach, it provides that spirit. It imbues everything with this life. So
it's so crazy because it's true. It's so crazy because it's true. And somehow keeping kashrus does this, and somehow keeping Shabbos does this, and somehow learning Torah does this. Like like the way I heard from Rav Mike Foyer, he said it's not just the content, it's the experience. Right? It's not just the content, it's the experience. Yeah. Right? Like eating keeping kosher. It's like it's not the content, it's the experience of keeping kosher. It's how somehow keeping kosher tunes you into Hashem. Somehow.
Yeah.
The ritual space. It's living in that ritual space. And in a certain sense, Shavuot is like the birthday of our entering into the Torah ritual space.
Yes, exactly. I would say, circling back around to our original question of what is the significance of this receiving? Like what's going on with the receiving? What exactly are we receiving? I would say that it's this point primarily that we're receiving. It's the ability to be open to that spirit that is able to imbue everything else. Just to be open to it, just the ability to be open to that, to receive that spirit. That is what's being received on Shavuot. It's not.
That's also what
like the particularities will come. Like the particularities can take a lifetime to study. Like you're not going to get all the particularities in one day. Like that's not going to happen, right? It takes a long time to develop, right? To develop that wisdom, that breadth and depth. But just the ability to be open to be imbued with that, that's what takes place on Shavuot, right? And to the extent that a person is there, to the extent that a person is tuned in on Shavuot, so the more he or she is opened up, and the more that space can be filled.
So can you turn that into a bracha, Shammai?
Mizrat Hashem, I hope that we can take the remaining hours before we enter this space and prepare ourselves to really, really open up, to be able to receive this sublime content that we call Torah, and to be true recipients of Torah, and to never lose that consciousness, to never lose that grasp of being true recipients, of being true mekablei Torah, recipients of Torah. so that everything that we do, all of our engagements on the personal level, familial level, communal level, national level, everything that we do can be imbued with that spirit, the spirit of Sinai.
Amen. Amen. I mean, Shammai, thank you so much. That was
This was
good.
great. Eitan, thank you for having me on.
Yeah. My thirst. I experienced a quenching of thirst.
Oh, I'm so glad.
May Hashem bless. Huh?
Stay thirsty.
I mean, yeah. It only makes me more thirsty, but at the same time, it quenches.
Yeah.
Okay, may Hashem bless you, Shammai, that you are able to learn your letter in the Torah this coming Shavuot. Amen. And to everyone out there as well who's watching this. Okay, we'll be in touch.
Bye-bye.
Bye.